Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a great show for you today. Dogwood, the genus known as Cornus. We are going to be diving into this particular tree / shrub. And you know I'm not doing this by myself. I am joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for letting me be on, even though we're talking about trees.
Ken, there's always room in life for growth. So here you go into the highest living forms on this planet, our trees. I'm happy to have you here with us today. And you know, we have to have an actual tree person here because it's not Ken, it's not me, it's horticulture educator Emily Swihart. Mylan, hey, Emily, how's it going?
Hi, guys. It's going well. We were visiting before this, and I'm feeling less confident that I'm the right tree person for this, but I'm very happy to be here. So we'll have some fun, if nothing else.
Exactly. We're happy to have you. And as we were discussing this, we're realizing, holy cow, there's a lot of dogwoods out there, and there's a lot of information about dogwoods. So maybe consider this episode a surface level. Because a preview. And I think if folks have questions or if they want more information, we can really dive more into particular species because there's just around the world, there is a lot of different types of dogwoods out there. It's a very popular landscape tree. So there's a lot of cultivars and that are also out there and marketed. And I feel like if we would start remarking on cultivars, we might be out of date by tomorrow. So, we don't know what's going to be in the garden center this spring.
Yeah. And there's a lot that grow really well in our region, right? So like it's popular, but there's different forms and different varieties. And so there's just kind of a lot to cover. So yeah.
Yes.
We're just starting the conversation.
But I would say probably one of the maybe better ways to divvy this particular genus of plants into two parts is one, we have shrub forms, and the other half we have tree forms. So let's start with the shorter guys out there, our dogwood shrubs. And of those different species, I know one that is, in my mind, more tree-like, but still considered a shrub, is the gray dogwood. Now, Emily, in terms of experience with gray dogwood, have you had any experience with this one as either a tree or shrub form? Because I have more of a tree in my yard.
Yeah, so my experience with gray dogwood comes from more of my natural resource background and endeavors. So it's not the most elegant, the most showy, the most cultivated of the dogwoods. I guess we should say it's gray dogwood is Cornus racemosa. And this one it's probably the most tolerant. It's the least fickle of the dogwoods. There are a few quirks that some of the other species have that do limit where you can grow them. Not a lot, but it is worth paying attention to your site, of course. And so gray dogwood, I see it like naturalizing spaces. It does that really well. It can kind of colonize. I've seen it advertised or promoted as being something you could do as a hedge. I see it a lot in landscapes that are not as highly managed or as highly cultivated, if you will. So one of the reasons I see that, too, is because it is more tolerant of a wider variety of landscapes. And so some of our in some of the literature, we'll talk about this. Some of them say, it likes well-drained, moist soils, but not too wet. Otherwise, you got to kind of stay in that middle of the moisture range. Some of our other dogwoods prefer a higher pH, which is sometimes harder to find in the Midwest. Now, gray dogwood kind of expands the spectrum for both of those, pH range and moisture tolerance, both from a wetness standpoint, so it can tolerate. I've seen it in like areas that have intermittent flooding, and then it can be in like more upland areas that have drier conditions. So more wide range from a growth standpoint, but it gets huge. It can be a very large shrub. we were debating whether it was a tree or a shrub. I call it a shrub. It's just a very large shrub. It never gets that like singular trunk. It would take a lot of work to prune it into a tree form. And so this is more shrub-like. But it does offer white flowers and white fruit that wildlife take advantage of. And so if you do have kind of a back 40 area or a large space in your landscape to fill, gray dogwood might be one of the dogwoods you can consider.
I do like mine. It's bigger, but it does fill in kind of an interesting space. Kind of as you described, Emily, it is in a very flat part of my yard that has very poor drainage. And I often wonder, well, where does all that water go? Because it's not flowing off of the site. It is sited underneath a giant pin oak, which is absorbing a lot of that water. But still, after it rains, that area just remains, very soggy. And it really likes it. It's filling in that understory of that pin oak, as the pin oak in a very poor fashion. Pin oaks don't do a good job at shedding their lower limbs, but the limbs are dead. And the gray dogwood's kind of filling in this mid canopy area underneath this pin oak. So I really like it. I usually miss the flowers. I'm like out of town for the weekend, and they're pretty quick, short lived. And I think I've only seen them once. But I do get to go out and I'm watching for the fruit, and the birds do clean that off pretty quickly once the fruit's ready.
Yeah. I'll also say with some of these shrubs, with some of these dogwood shrubs, so some have higher tannin content in their leaf and their twig material, and so they're less desirable for deer. Some do get browsed. All of these, I would say, I've seen like rabbits and squirrels chew on them. And one of the benefits of something like a gray dogwood that colonizes is that you don't even notice, really. Like, it will put up more growth. And so if you do lose some in the winter, it's not like the whole tree is shot. Like, it just fills back in. And those flowers are not as showy, not as robust as some of the other ones we're going to talk about. And so that's not... I don't consider this like a front yard plant. It's more of a backyard plant. But from a wildlife value, it's worth having.
I agree. Yeah, I really like it. And in terms of maintenance, it's just pruning those suckers that you don't want in certain spots and encouraging those in other spots to form that hedge, and then pruning any limbs that hit you while you're mowing or get in the way of anything. It's pruning.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So we kind of started maybe with our least flashy of the Cornus. Why don't we move on to one that folks probably will be familiar with or have seen, and if they haven't seen, they will after they're aware of it, because it's popular and it's showy, and it is called the Redosier Dogwood.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, the fancy stems. Now, even if you don't see these in the landscape, I guarantee you've seen these in like floral arrangements, because people love to use these in like the fall and the winter for flower arranging. And these next few dogwoods that we're going to talk about, they do a spectacular job of having usually red colored stems in the fall and winter months.
Yeah. So Redosier, and I'll put a picture in here. I saw this pictures from St. Louis, and they use it in one of their city. Was it the City Garden? Is that what it's called? Right downtown. Mm-hmm. This is a plant worth having a prominent place in the landscape because of those red stems. I have 3 in my front yard. My neighbor has them, so it's versatile. I'm trying to demonstrate that this is a versatile plant that can be put into a lot of places. So we have it in St. Louis in a highly visible, highly trafficked city park. I've got it in just my front yard. I chose it to put out there. It's like one of the first things you see as you approach the house. And then my neighbor, since I live in the country, has it on the exterior side of his windbreak. And it kind of provides that lower level, that first layer of the windbreak. And so it's a really versatile plant. It looks really nice, but it's durable. To keep those red twigs, you do some pruning. There's some maintenance activities that are required if you want to maintain the red twig. If you don't do the maintenance work of pruning out the older twigs, you'll have a nice plant. It'll continue to thrive. It just will not have that red twig color because that is on the newer growth, about 3 years or less. And just doing some of these, renewal pruning cuts, from time to time, every 3 years or so, will keep you having that kind of robust red color. There's also yellow ones. There's also yellow twigs. It's not as popular, and I bring it up later in the conversation because I don't really like them personally, but that's not what this is about. But I don't know. Do you have an opinion?
I don't necessarily have an opinion. I do like the red twigs because they're a bit more reliable. From what I've heard, the yellow ones are not as reliably colored, a bit more finicky.
Yeah.
I've planted both, and the rabbits took care of them for me. So,
oh, the bunnies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To do the rejuvenation cuts, and honestly, I get people plant what you want. Ignore my comments and my opinions. They don't matter for anything. They're lovely. But yes, the yellow is a little more finicky. From the red, the rejuvenation cuts, they are pretty forgiving. My neighbor a couple of years ago went and so it's on his windbreak, right? This is not a landscape he's putting a lot of investment into like maintaining, but they were getting out of control and needed to be, have some rejuvenation done. And just the whole line of them, took them all out at about a foot above the ground. Generally what we would recommend is just pruning to the ground, but he took them out a little higher, and 2 years later they're huge and stunning and bright red, which is really lovely against like a fresh fallen snow, and that green dark background of the white pines that he's got there. So it's an option, I guess. I want to bring that up because this is just a maintenance choice people would have if they have a red twig dogwood. You can do it every year, or you could do it, just kind of like all in one shot, and then have a smaller shrub that first year, a little larger shrub that second year, kind of depending on what you would want to do. This one's also a little more tolerant of different moisture levels, and so I think that's also helps contribute to its popularity. Not quite as large as gray, still pretty big. It can get pretty big, 7 to 9 feet, I would say. So that's a sizable plant in the landscape.
I don't know what exactly it is, because this was planted in my yard before I lived in this house, but I believe it is a sericea, or a Redosier Dogwood. It's variegated. Doesn't get the red stems though, but has really nice variegated foliage, and it looks particularly stunning where it's sited. It's near a downspout of my house, and there's other hydrangeas. There's some ferns. It's in a more shady type area, and it performs really well. That variegation, that white coloration of the leaves, adds a little bit more brightness to a dark corner along my house. So I really do like it. And even though I don't know what it is, I don't plan on replacing it because it has performed really well, and it just brightens up an area. So not only do they have the red stems, there are a couple cultivars out there that have variegation of their foliage. And I do love it. You can't overdo it, so be careful. It's a forewarning, don't overdo your variegated foliage because then it gets wild and crazy.
It looked really wild.
Yes.
All right. So similar, just I will note that there is another red twig, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it is not native. So sericea is native to Illinois. This one's not, but it also has red twigs, and it is called Bloodtwig Dogwood. And this one's native to Europe. So if you do traveling, it's kind of hard to find. I don't know if I've ever seen it in the nursery industry here. I think it has more limited fall color. So we didn't even say about the fall color of red twig dogwood, which is bright red. Really, it's the foliage. We'll talk about a few issues that it could potentially develop. But for the most part, I think it is a nice foliage throughout the season, but then it turns red. But this Cornus sanguinea I saw it, and maybe you guys saw something different, that the fall color is not quite as desirable, which would mean the market value of it in the Midwest or in the United States just can't compete with red twig dogwood. So,
yeah, I see kind of a darker fall color to that one. Typically, deeper tones, not as bright red. Maybe more maroon-like, more purpley. Yeah. Another one out there, shrub dogwood, is Cornus alba, and this is another one that has red stems. It's a little bit shorter than the ones we've talked about, but again, it follows much of the same traits and patterns as the other ones we've just described. And as Emily said, even it's short, but even if you don't prune it, you still get a really nice habit with these shrubby dogwoods. I think Cornus alba is one of those that has a really nice mounded habit to it. And again, red coloration of the stems. And maybe we should even mention there's silky dogwood, which is very wild dogwood that grows out wild in prairies in Illinois and the Great Plains. So there's another very common dogwood you might find on the edge of your woods. All right, so we've described a little bit about these shrub dogwoods, but what happens if you are someone walking along and you come across a plant and you want to know if it's a dogwood or not? How do you tell the difference between a dogwood and some other plant? Emily, do you have any identification tips for us?
Yeah, and that's a really good point to bring up, that we should talk about identification. So they're first hard to identify. Some of these look very similar to other ones, especially out in nature where they haven't been cultivated and we don't have prominent features to identify them with. So first, if you're struggling, that's okay. But to narrow it down, even to the Cornus genus, one thing that is a little bit unusual in the plant world would be the opposite leaf arrangement. And so most plants, I think most plants, that's maybe a subjective term, but would have alternate. So if it's opposite, which means it leaves right across from each other, you can narrow it down to a few different native genuses, dogwood being one of them. And then the leaves have a really interesting venation. Do you want to describe it?
So they have the arcuate. So there's your vocabulary for the day. So you've got the strong midrib and your secondary veins coming out. They kind of curve as they reach the margins, curve up. So I think a lot of times when I see them, it looks like the secondary veins are almost sunken a little bit too. So at least on some of the dogwoods.
Yeah. I'll try to put a picture in here if we can find one. It's distinct. Once you kind of recognize it, I think people will start seeing it and seeing it as a dogwood, because there's not a lot else that it reminds me of. So, yep. Thanks for the vocab. That's fun. People are learning, right?
Yeah. I'm curious, what memory device did you use to memorize opposite plants, opposite trees? Do you remember? Do you still have that in your head? Okay.
Of course I do.
Okay.
So mine, they were for native plants, right? So these are not non-native. It was mad bucking horse. So maple, ash, dogwood, horse chestnut, and buckeye. So buckeye and then horse chestnut. Mm-hmm. And so, do you have one?
There was madcap horse. So the cap was Caprifoliaceae family.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ken, what was yours for memorizing?
Erase that from my memory.
Replaced with bug facts.
I would say you probably have something about insects.
I don't know if I do or not.
Okay.
I'll have to think about that.
So while you're thinking about that, so those are the leaves. The flowers on the shrubs are different than on the trees that we'll talk about here. And so we've got some pictures of both, and you'll see how they're distinctly different. The flowers on the shrubs almost always are in compound clusters. They're in tight little clusters. A lot of times they're kind of like a panicle umbel arrangement to give easy access to insects for pollination, or wildlife for pollination, because they are animal pollinated. They are not as showy. So there's bracts that are around the flowers on the trees that are really large and pronounced, and we will generally say like, oh, that's the flower. Similar to what we do for poinsettias. They're actually modified leaves. Those are just not as showy, not as pronounced on the shrubs. And so a little more delicate, more of them, I would guess, because they're smaller on the shrubs. I've never counted, but I would just, and there's a lot on some of these flowering trees, but just really small kind of clusters of flowers. Different colors, mostly white, but some different cultivars have pinks and reds. Yeah, but mostly white would be what you'd naturally find.
Should we dive into our dogwood trees next? Kicking off with perhaps maybe one of the most beloved dogwoods out there, the flowering dogwood, or Cornus florida, which is another one I have in my yard. So I have a gray dogwood. I have some kind of variegated shrub dogwood. I don't know what it is, probably sericea. And then I do know for a fact that I have flowering dogwood. What variety or cultivar? I have no idea. It is a red flower or bracted type. So it is red. That's all I know. And I know it's of Cornus florida. And it's one of my favorite trees in my yard. It is a favorite. Now, in terms of culture of this one, I know that flowering dogwoods can survive and are tolerant of a lot of different conditions. However, I feel like they're also very shallow rooted, and you have to protect that root system from drying out, getting sopping wet. And so a nice mulch layer for my dogwood, when we bought the house, the dogwood was kind of puny looking. What I did to try to revitalize it was some good pruning, effective pruning, and then a nice wide mulch layer has really seemed to benefit this dogwood. And the way that I prune this is I let all of the limbs hang down. Even if I get my eyes gouged out when I'm mowing, it doesn't matter. I love this tree so much. Even if I could just touch the alligator-like bark when I can't see as an old person, that will be just divine to me. I love this tree. It is my favorite. And I keep getting told to prune the limbs and to prune it away from the road. And I say, no, I won't do it. Does anybody else like flowering dogwood other than me?
I like it. I don't know if I like it to that extent. But.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
I don't know if I'd sacrifice an eye, but
I think there's somebody else out there who likes dogwood just as much as I do.
yes. It's a stunning tree. It is beautiful. We'll put in some pictures here. And I just flipped through one of our most beloved Emmanuel Woody of Landscape Plants books. And there are 4.5 pages of cultivars listed. And this is, and it's expanding. So which flower color do you have?
So my reddish pink.
Red. Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
One of those in that 4 pages of Ondur. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's those, like, again, those are those bracts actually around those little flower clusters, and they last for a really long time. I don't know if you've ever kind of like documented how long they last, but that's one of the appealing things about the dogwoods in general, but the, flowering dogwood is the bracts, we'll call them flowers, can last up to a month. Like other spring blooming, trees just don't have a show that long. And it's profound. Like they're large, like 2 to 4 inches, I would say generally, like, and there's so many of them. And they usually emerge before the leaves come out. So it's just this stunning display of colors. And so and they go from white. That's why I asked about your color, because their cultivars go from like white to light pink. There's a little variegation sometimes available to like a true pink, a rose, magenta, deep kind of burgundy reddish hues. So you can really kind of customize what you like. So I'm jealous. I don't have one in my landscape, and I honestly maybe need to add 1 or 2 or 4. I don't know. I've got some space, so I could.
Don't stop at 4.
I could get all the colors, all of the cultivars. No,
variegated
Rainbow
leaves.
Dogwoods.
But I think one thing for flowering dogwood to remember is just like an understory edge of the forest. So, while we plant them in full sun a lot. Like Chris mentioned, they're shallow rooted, and if you don't have consistent moisture, they're going to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind when you're siting it. If you can give them maybe a little shade, they may appreciate that a little bit.
Yeah, not too much shade though.
That? Yeah. Keep going. I was going to say we got to talk about this sun pendulum here. It impacts the flowering and fall color.
Yep. Yeah. So you want some shade so that the moisture levels are protected and they're not just getting beat up by the harsh sun. But you can't have too much shade because then that affects the flowering. It can just diminish the flower set and also the fall color. So got to find the right spot in your landscape for them. And they're medium-sized trees. I don't think we talked about like the size. They can get 30 feet, which is a sizable tree plant in your landscape. It's not, an overstory tree. We haven't claimed it to be one. It's an understory tree, of course, but 30 feet is still 30 feet. So site them appropriately.
Yeah. I think mine is sited underneath the sweet gum and right next to a white pine. I think the sweet gum and the dogwood have an understanding though. The dogwood is about maybe 20 foot. That's I would say about 20 foot tall. And the sweet gum saying no taller. You're an understory plant. I'm the canopy. So they seem to have figured out their own little community, and it's delightful. Again, favorite in my yard. The fall color is also outstanding. I have a picture of that. I can pop that in. It is a nice red, dark red color, which stands out really nicely. We kind of mentioned the shrub dogwoods and the red stems. The red fall color of this dogwood against that white pine backdrop. I'm giving, for people listening, I'm giving the Italian kissing symbol. Very nice, very nice.
So we've praised this a lot. It is not without flaw. There are some challenges to growing Cornus florida in Illinois. First, it's not native. The native range does not come up this far into Illinois. It's more southern Illinois. It kind of wraps around. It's an interesting little, it almost like said, Illinois, you're good. We'll catch you in the trade. But the native range just stopped.
Yeah. We'll catch you in that climate change happening later on.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But there are some struggles with cold tolerance in our region. We're all kind of northwestern Illinois. So there's some issues with cold tolerance. And then there's also some challenges with anthracnose in particular and dogwood borer. And so there's been some breeding programs that are crossing Cornus florida with, I think I got this mixed up. You believe it is with Kousa, correct? Or did I get this mixed up in my head?
Yeah, I think I read Kousa.
Anthracnose?
Yeah, to increase the cold tolerance and the pest and disease resistance.
I thought it was Kousa that had a resistance to anthracnose.
There's some, more so than Florida.
Resistance being not immune still can be a problem,
but not as much of a problem. Well, and then with the cold tolerance too, knowing where that tree came from, like if you're getting a tree from a southern breeding program or from a southern source, the cold tolerance of that is going to be lesser than if it's coming from a northern source. So if you're in northern Illinois, try to find those northern varieties or something that's been grown in a northern area. It'd be a little more cold adapted.
Excellent point. Yeah, provenance, where you're getting your plant material. Do we want to just touch briefly on Kousa then? As another tree, there's not much to say about it.
Yeah, I would say, Cornus Kousa being the kind of the Florida relative on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. I know it as there's Kousa Dogwood. I was taught Korean Dogwood in school, but I think more commonly it is Kousa or Chinese Dogwood. And so, but it is very similar to Cornus florida in regards to what it provides. Flowers, it does provide a fruit, and it does provide fall color. Now, the fruit is distinctly different with Cornus Kousa being more of this like, how do you describe, like a ball with little
Like
spikes, kind of
strawberry-like.
sandpapery. Not really spikes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a
Looks like a
strawberry.
round strawberry.
Mhm.
Yes. A rounded strawberry. I like that. And it is, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I would say, but it's not a strawberry.
No.
As it was described.
No. It is considered edible, but Emily, what was that particular term that was in the texture of the Kousa fruit?
It was slimy to mealy, which are adjectives I don't look for on a menu.
No. I'll take the slimy and mealy fruit bowl, please.
Yes.
Yeah. But it is bright red, ornamental, bird food, squirrel food. Mammals will eat it, birds will eat it, and humans can eat it. I think in its native range, folks over in Asia do use this or can utilize it in cuisine. But it is also well adapted to our North American climate here in Illinois. A bit more upright than flowering dogwood. Flowering dogwood has kind of more horizontal type branching patterns, if not more dips down a little bit and then upright. Kousa is a bit more upright, stands more upright. And I still think it's a pretty nice landscape plant. And while it is not part of my dogwood collection, I would not mind if it was also present.
Maybe this year.
Nah, I got
You're
other
running out of
things to
space,
plant.
aren't you?
Running out of space.
There's another tree that we could talk about that really doesn't look much like these other two, which is the Cornelian cherry dogwood or Cornus moss. Ken, do you want to describe some of the differences? This one's a fun one to consider.
Yeah, so this one's got yellow flowers to it, and like you're looking at pictures, it almost looks like to me like forsythia, like with all the blooms on those. And it's also got like these others, it's green leaves, but it has variegation, cultivars that are variegated, and bright red fruit that will develop. Those are edible too, aren't they? Yeah, I think. Or edible for humans. They're edible for animals, but.
And maybe as we mentioned, edible Cornus Florida flowering dogwood. Humans don't eat that one. That's for the birds only, not for people.
It reminds me of forsythia a little bit when you see the pictures of them in bloom.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I had the same thought. It was just like, oh, I've seen something like that before. And I also thought witch hazel, not quite so. I mean, it's not. The forsythia is a really good comparison, but I love witch hazel, so my mind kind of went there. But it's a yellow blooming small tree, and so that's kind of a fun early spring too. Like it blooms really early, and so kind of kickstarts the spring bloom season. So,
and I'm looking at the book I have it. Flowers can persist for 3 weeks and longer because of cool weather. So another longer blooming plant.
And of course, you have all different cultivars out there. I know there's variegated leaf cultivars of this one as well. Gold leaf cultivars. I believe the cherry fruit is red, but there's cultivars with a yellow or orange looking fruit. So the landscape trade has taken this one and made it all different types of things out there that you can use in your landscape.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's really fun to have all these options. Like with such a reliable plant, like from a design standpoint, you can customize. Like if you're trying to go with a certain color scheme, or you prefer, warm hues over cool hues, you could just like personalize it. It's nice instead of just saying like, you get this one option, take it or leave it. Some plants are like that. Which is fine. Some of those plants are really, really worth having anyways. But this one you get to customize.
Now, I might not plant a Kousa Dogwood in my yard, but I'd love to have this one in my yard. The Cornus alternifolia, which is the Pagoda Dogwood. I have not grown this one. I have only seen pictures of this one, and I have said to myself every time I've seen a picture, I need to have this tree. but as far as I know, it's hard to find in the nursery trade. And so is there anything else I need to know besides I can't find this thing anywhere? The Pagoda Dogwood.
For our more northern listeners, it is a more northern species. So it is the range is farther north. And so I do wonder, and I haven't looked into this, I do wonder if it would be more available farther north. I think we are at the southern end of its range. So that may have something to do with it. Maybe not. I'm speculating. This one also has those clusters of flowers. It doesn't have those really big bracts. Like the four-leaved bracts. So really a nice plant. Yeah, you can add it to the landscape.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Purple fruit.
Ah, purple fruit. I like that.
Oh.
Plus the strong. Yes, that horizontal branching that gives it that Chinese pagoda type architecture. Combine that with purple fruit. I got to find a spot to put this.
Sounds like you need a bigger yard.
It's a medium-sized plant though too, right? Like these are small trees, and so make sure that you have 25 feet. So one more that's not really a shrub and it's not really a tree that I really want to find, and it is hard, is called the Bunchberry. This is Cornus canadensis. This is a ground cover. You guys have seen this, yes?
Pictures only, but yes.
Yeah, pictures
okay.
only.
Oh, okay. I also haven't seen it in person, but I want it. It sounds adorable. If I can just use that term professionally to describe a plant, it just sounds adorable. It's only about 4 to 6 inches in height, little white flowers, was a little bright red fruit. And so if you could find it, it'd be great. One of the challenges with this, though, in the wild in particular, and the reason I think probably it's not as commercially available, is it has low fruit set, low germination rates, and it's a low survival rate. So those are hard propositions for plant breeders to take on. But I don't know, all that stuff just maybe makes you want it even more. So
I don't think it likes hot weather either. For what I've read about it is they were talking about it growing in Maine and being considered a weed, and like blueberries, because they have the low bush blueberries up there. So they'll actually spray it to get rid of it. But when people try to move it outside of that native range, unless you're growing in the Appalachian Mountains or something where you've got cooler summers, people really struggle to get it to establish and live.
That's how it goes sometimes. We can want all we want, but sometimes we just live places where we can't have plants, and we can accept that, or we could try it, and sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But still an interesting form. So we have ground covers, we have shrubs, and we have trees, all in the Cornus genus. So there are a few challenges. Ken, do you want to talk about, especially anthracnose, and then also dogwood borer? There's a couple of the primary challenges.
So now we can get to the fun and interesting stuff of today's podcast.
What kills these trees and shrubs?
So dogwood borer is one you hear about a lot. I don't think I've ever seen it, but it's one you hear about. So this is a clearwing moth. It's going to lay its eggs on the trees, and typically they're going to lay them around damaged areas. So if you're a lot of times when you're pruning, particularly the trees and stuff, you don't necessarily want to do that in the spring or summer when they're out laying eggs and stuff. So damage from pruning, if you're whacking it with a lawnmower or a weed whacker, you have these openings that they can get into. The eggs will be laid, caterpillars will come out, they'll start feeding on that cambium layer. So similar to emerald ash borer, feeding on where that all the water and nutrients are going up and down. They can girdle branches and trunks and stuff and cause that dieback and wilting and stuff. And if you get severe enough infestation or they girdle the trunk, it can kill your plants, but it can cause a decline of those trees. So, making sure plants aren't stressed. They really like stressed trees. They're more susceptible to it. So, again, that proper siting and watering, not too wet, not too dry. Got to find that Goldilocks zone for your trees and try to prevent some of that stress to them. Will make them a little less susceptible to attack from those. Dogwood anthracnose is another one you hear quite a bit about, particularly for flowering dogwood. And I'm going to read, let me find that. So there's a book, it's called Dogwoods, the genus Cornus. So this is like 200 some page book just on dogwoods. So as you can tell, there's a lot of them out there. So this is how they kind of describe why this is such a big issue. Dogwood anthracnose has had its most significant impact on native populations, especially in moist wooded climates. In the southeastern United States, the spread has been quickest and the impact most severe in mountainous areas where cloud fog is prevalent during the key infection period. A 1986 report listed the results of a survey of the native populations of Cornus, Florida, and the Catoctin Mountain National Park in Maryland. According to reports, 3% of the plants surveyed in 1984 showed no signs of anthracnose and 33% were dead. A follow-up report indicated that in the same population 4 years later, all trees were infected and 89% were dead, and there appeared to be no regeneration of young plants. Now, from this population, they did find the first resistant cultivar, or the first resistant cultivar released, Appalachian Spring, from that population. So there is some flowering dogwood resistance out there, some cultivars that are resistant to it. But for this, so it's you're getting, typically the infections are starting off on the leaves. You're going to get this discoloration on the leaves. Can get them on the bracts as well, and then this can progress into the wood, into the branches and stuff. And you kind of get these sunken lesions on the branches and stuff. And that can then spread and get these cankers, which again can girdle and kill stems and branches and stuff like that. And a lot of times these trees that are really severely infected will start sending out a lot of epicormic shoots or water sprouts. That's kind of the plant's last ditch effort to try to survive when it's losing a lot of its foliage and branches and stuff. So, like we mentioned, there has been some breeding with the Kousa Dogwood and flowering dogwood to try to get some disease resistance. So Kousa is more resistant than flowering dogwood. It still can be infected, but there's things like Aurora, Celestial Galaxy, these star type names, Stellar Pink, have some resistance to this anthracnose. They're also called discula anthracnose because there's also spot anthracnose, which doesn't cause nearly as severe symptoms or problems with it. A lot of times you see it on the discoloration on the bracts or on the leaves as well. And there's Septoria and Cercospora leaf spot. Again, you're getting these spots on the leaves. And with all these good sanitation, cleaning up diseased plant material, preventing plants from being stressed, again, with proper fertility and pH and soil moisture, all of that stuff can help prevent some of the more severe symptoms sometimes. But if you've got a susceptible cultivar and you get that discula or dogwood anthracnose, that can be a problem for you.
I think that's the most serious of problems of dogwood, right? Industry-wide, that's the one they're most concerned about and working hard to breed out or breed resistance.
Yeah, and University of Tennessee, and at one point, I'm assuming they still are, was doing a lot of breeding and cultivar development for flowering dogwood. That's kind of like the epicenter, at least last I saw, of that work down there. And then I guess, I've heard scale insects can be an issue on dogwoods too. So again, that's, typically they're not getting to populations where it can cause problems, which you can spray for that. Dogwood borer, if you have issues with it, you can spray the trunk and stuff and major branches with a pesticide to try to kill those caterpillars as they're hatching and stuff. So, but once they get in, there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
Yeah. Keep your dogwoods healthy. Keep them mulched.
Site them properly.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ken. That was thrilling.
I'm glad I could contribute.
Well, no, that's good. I think we all had to do a lot of research for this, a lot of reading. Does anybody have any fun facts to share about dogwoods today?
Used to be made golf clubs.
Yeah.
Dogwood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the name dogwood comes from different, there's theories of where it comes from. Dagwood would be one of them. And it was, let me see.
Skewers.
Yep, meat skewers. It's a really dense wood when it's dry. So,
yeah, splitting wedges too, like splitting wood.
Yeah,
use dogwood. Supposedly, the Trojan horse was made out of dogwood.
Oh.
So they say.
All right, I dove into a little more research. So when you look at the cultivar names, a lot of times Cherokee pops up as being part of the name. I mean, there's a lot of cultivars, but that one just like stood out to me looking through them. So there's like Cherokee Princess, Cherokee Chief, Cherokee Brave, Cherokee Sunset, Cherokee Daybreak, and Cherokee Maiden are a few of the ones that I found. So like that number kind of made me just wonder what was going on. So, and these are all of Florida, Cornus, Florida. And so I dove into it just a little bit, and there's some ethnobotany usages from the Cherokee Nation. I'll just read it now. Okay, so I'll just read what was from their website, the nation's website. And so it says, the dogwood tree has been used by Cherokees for many generations. Dogwood leaves have been used for the treatments of skin infections and rashes due to certain antiseptic and disinfectant properties. Bark of the dogwood can be used in making a tea to alleviate anxiety and mild depression. Conversely, the same drink is also consumed during stomp dances to keep dancers alert throughout the night. Other uses include forming the twigs into toothbrush substitutes, the wood into tool handles, and branches into arrow shafts. And so a lot of our native plants have been used by indigenous peoples for a lot of different purposes. I just wanted to kind of share that. And I also don't love that we use the name of the nation in some of these names. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. And so I kind of wanted to honor the nation by acknowledging that they use this tree that we love so much and is so beautiful, but it has real cultural significance to them. And so that was an interesting sidebar of the research that I went into.
Yeah. Well, as far as we know, a hugely popular landscape tree named after their nation from their native lands, which they were taken from.
Correct.
They get nothing from any of that. So, yeah.
The primary Cherokee reservation is now in Oklahoma, and the range of the Cornus, Florida does not extend to northeast Oklahoma. And so something to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm. I also heard something as you were reading that, Emily, on a slightly different note. If I ever write a book, brew a beer, anything, it's going to be called Bark of the Dogwood. Just know that right now. That is mine. I have trademarked it, and I now own it. Bark of the Dogwood. I really.
Are you sure there's not already one?
I don't know, but in the text you read, it said that Bark of the Dogwood. I'm like, whoa, that's a great name for something. And that goes into my favorite joke. How can you tell that the tree you're looking at is a dogwood? by the bark. Da-da-da, da-da-da. Yes, I say that to my kids at least once a
Dad
week.
joke.
And, yep, we drive by my dogwood, and it's like, hey, kids, how do you know that's a dogwood? Yeah, they don't talk to me when we're driving by that tree. They put on their headphones.
Then I think you're raising them right.
Good.
You gotta do it when their friends are over.
Oh, yes, all their friends know the joke. Yeah. I would say the one dogwood thing that I discovered and found out is I thought, when we had our cherry blossom trees, when those were given to us by Japan, I thought it was kind of like a gift, and it was a gift, but it was also sort of an exchange. The U.S. also sent over dogwood trees to Japan to be planted over there, and so I had no idea. But it was actually an exchange of these kind of notable species that were native within each country to each other's kind of capital cities. And so I just thought that was very interesting, that we sent them dogwoods. They sent us these beautiful flowering cherries. And yeah, that's what I learned.
I did not know that either.
Yeah. I like that nations doing diplomacy through plant exchange. As long as it's all vetted and everything, they're not doing invasive species. I guess there needs to be some checks.
APHIS.
There needs to be some checks on that. But
Yeah.
if it all works out and it's just beautiful flowering trees, I like it.
Yes. They did it back in the Wild West of plant exchanges too, where did not vet anything. I think I saw a bird eating that.
They did screen plants though. So when the cherries, the first shipment of cherries were being delivered to the United States, when they arrived in the Northwest, there was a plant check and they were infected with, I want to say an insect. I would have to go back and look, but they destroyed them all, the first shipment. So there was a little screening.
Well, that was a lot of great information about dogwoods. And again, we're just really skimming the surface here. This was a light reading, and by light reading, I think we all spent maybe a couple hours, respectively, each one of us doing research. So there's a lot to know about dogwoods. Maybe we can dive more deeper into more specific species at a future date. Well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Emily Swihart, editing a podcast episode. Oh my gosh, there's a parade going on right now. It's cheers and everything. Oh, we're so happy to have you helping out on board, editing these podcasts. Thank you, Emily. We appreciate you not only editing the podcast, but being here with us today, talking all things dogwood.
It's my pleasure. I always enjoy joining you guys. And if there's a tree topic that I can spend hours researching, sign me up.
All right, the list is long.
Yeah.
Ken, we better get more tree topics on the docket here, and I know we have them on our list. I'm looking at them right now on our document that we share with all of us. But thank you, Ken, for being with us here also today to tell us about all those things that go wrong with dogwoods.
Welcome. Yes, thank you, Emily. We'll hold you to that the tree episodes and. Chris, again, thank you as always, and let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. The perennial plant of the year. Don't listen, Emily. I know it's not a favorite. Clustered mountain mint. We're going to be talking about what is going on with the perennial plant of the year, what it is, this mountain mint next week. So, Ken, I guess we're reading more because I know about not that much about mountain mint. So hit the books again.
More than me. I've heard of it. That's about the extent.
I smelled it. It's minty sometimes. All right. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing.
Next week, I should just pop on and defend myself. 30 seconds.
Yes.
So I'm not here, but I'm going to be here for a minute.
That would be funny. Yes.
Can I
and
do
now
that?
A testimonial from Emily. Yes.
That was not nice. That wasn't very nice. I lost a little bit of trust in you, Ken. looking at you.
Did he have you drink pickle beer?
He didn't lose it
Yeah.
after the toothache plant or the cicadas or anything else. It took pickle beer.